Hey guys, welcome along to the Better Dads Club podcast. This week, I sat down with Nicolas Mathevon from the University of Saint-Etienne in France. Now, my French pronunciation is terrible, so just wait for him to let everybody know where he's from and who he is. I was really interested and really excited to sit down with Nicolas because I came across some of his research earlier in the year, and he is a professor of bioacoustics and spent a long time studying the sounds of the animal kingdom and kind of recognizing whether or not information is being passed on. And then in a chance meeting with a friend of his, they decided to set up some research to find out if there was any information being portrayed in the cries of a baby. And obviously we know that there are many people out there that believe that they know exactly what their baby's cry is and what it means. But yeah, I think you'll find his research quite interesting. We also go into the unique nature of humans raising children as far as how much of a cooperative species we are, and also give some really great advice for fathers in terms of how to really get connected with your babies for life. Now, before we get into this, I invite you to hit the like and subscribe button so that you can stay notified with all of our upcoming episodes. Enjoy. All right, well, welcome along to the Better Dads Club podcast. Nicolas, thank you very much for joining me all the way from France.
Yeah.
What time is it where you are? It's 7 p.m. here in New Zealand right now?
It's 9 a.m.
9 a.m. Fantastic. Well, I'm glad to be here with you and probably your first meeting on a Monday morning. So that's wonderful. Thank you for your time. I came across some of your research earlier this year around understanding babies' cries and the argument between parental instinct of, a mother's nurture versus nature and whether fathers can actually learn these things as well. So it was really quite cool to come across and that there's actually been some research into that. But before we get into that, I'd like to, find out a little bit about you, who you are, where you've come from.
Okay, so I'm Nicolas Mathevon. So I'm professor at the University of Saint-Etienne in France, and I'm leading a research lab dedicated to bioacoustics. So bioacoustics is the science of animal and human acoustic communication, how animals and us can use vocalizations to exchange information, I would say. So my research revolves around finding how information can be coded in vocalizations and how the receivers decode this information, and what are the factors that modulate the way the receivers decode the information. So I'm working with many different animals, included humans, and going from, I would say, crocodiles to birds to mammals to the different kinds of models. And I started working with human baby cries more than 12 years ago, I think now, because I was working at that time on the begging calls by chicks and begging calls by marine mammals and blah blah blah. And I met one day one friend of mine who was responsible in a big hospital of the mother-child department, and he told me, we have to do something with human baby cries, because nobody knows exactly which kind of information they support. We know almost nothing about how we decode them, etc. And so we decided to set up a big research project together. And now we are here. Yeah, we have moved forward quite a lot, I think.
Fantastic. And how did you get into this research?
I was passionate about animal behavior, and I was also very, very interested in understanding the mechanisms of animal and human behavior. And acoustic communication is very interesting in the sense that it supports the social interactions between individuals. And you can also, one part that I find very interesting is that you can ask questions using what we call the playback experiments. And in human, when we are working with humans, we call them psychoacoustic experiments. It does mean that you can record the acoustic signal, the vocalizations, the baby cries or whatever, and you can modify them using your computers, for instance, and then you can play back to receivers and assess their answers, assess how they decode the information. And so you have a way of doing experiments and really dig understand very deeply the process of information transfer between the emitters and the receivers. And when we started working with human babies, actually we really decided to apply the same kind of approach that we had with animals. At that time, so 15 years ago, I was working with my PhD student Isabelle Charrier on mother-baby communication in the fur seal. And we demonstrated that the mother and the baby, they were able to recognize their voice, each other. And it takes around 2 to 5 days after birth so that the mother and the baby becomes able to recognize themselves vocally. And so the very, very first experiment or research project that we did with human baby cries, we ask exactly the same question. Are parents able to recognize their baby just by hearing their cries? And so we set up an experiment where we played back the cries of different babies, including their baby, to parents, men and women, and we really assessed their ability to recognize their baby from their cries. So you see the very, very first experiment and the first motivation was to test in the human species whether we could find, similar process that we were very aware of in the animal world. And it was funny because at that time, there was very, very few scientific papers on human baby cries in the literature. And there was one in the 70s who had reported the same kind of experiment. They tested whether mothers and fathers were able to recognize their baby using their cries. And their conclusion was that mothers were very good at that and fathers were very bad. But when we went to the methods of the papers, we found that actually it was really, really not very controlled, because the playback were done, on a simple table, and the doctor was there, and so there was a possibility of many bias during the experiment. So we did again these experiments, but in a very, very controlled way. It does mean that each parent was tested separately. First, we recorded the babies during their bath. So we had those discomfort cries, I would say. And then we tested the father and the mother separately in an acoustic chamber. So they could see anything. They couldn't see anything except the screen where there was, the question, is it your baby that you are hearing or not? And they had to push on a button, yes or no. And we were not in the same room, so it was not possible for us to influence the parent. And the test was very difficult because each parent has to hear to more than 15 different babies, different cries that they have never heard. And we never said them, okay, there is twice your baby or 3 times your baby. They were not aware of that, okay? And the duration of each cry sequence was around 6 seconds. And at the end of the experiment, we had many parents that were almost crying, saying, we totally failed. We were absolutely unable to recognize our baby from the cries, blah, blah, blah. And actually, when we analyzed the results, it was excellent. I mean, we had almost 100% of success among mothers and fathers. They were absolutely able to recognize their baby just by hearing their cries. It was, these babies have been recorded when they were 2-3 months old. So each parent had already a huge, experience of their baby cries. And the only person that failed the test, it was indeed a father, but it was a father that spent less than 2 hours a week at home. So of course, it had absolutely no opportunity of hearing his baby crying. But all the other parents, they succeeded extremely well. So that was the very, very first psychoacoustic test that we did with human baby cries. And from then we expanded our research and we did tons of other things.
Okay. So this first experiment is really around, do both parents recognize when their baby is crying?
Yeah, absolutely. When the parents, we demonstrated that a parent is able to recognize his or her baby just by hearing their cry. I think that the important thing is that and things that we have to realize, that when you become a parent, you become a specialist of your baby. And day after day, you learn how your baby is crying. You learn everything about the acoustics of your baby cries. And so as you become a specialist of your baby cries, you become probably able to identify any subtle modification of these cries. And if there is, something that is going wrong with your baby because he's sick or whatever, then you will be able to identify this from the cries. And this, we tested this in another study, for instance, that I can talk to you about. In another study, we asked people to rate the level of distress of human baby cries. And the first thing that before we did the test, we recorded the babies in different situations. So let's say two very different contexts. One was, I would say, a discomfort context. So the babies were just in their bath. And the other was a distress context. The babies it was during a vaccination session, So some of the babies were feeling, hurt or whatever. So the level of distress encoded in those two types of cries was very different. And we had also a gradient between babies, blah, blah, blah. And so we asked people to rate the level of distress coded in the cries of the babies. And what we did, we tested different types of people. We tested people. We had people that had absolutely no experience with babies. So no brothers and sisters. They had never did any babysitting. They have no babies in their family or whatever. So maybe they had heard a baby when there was in a train or something like this, but had absolutely no experience with babies. And at the other end of the spectrum, we had parents of very young babies that were parents who were currently taking care of a young baby. And between them, we had people with no baby, but with some experience with the babies because they had in the past younger brothers and sisters, or they did babysitting. We had also parents, but of older children. So their babies were not more babies, they were children. So we had this gradient of experience, between those people. And we tested all those guys, so men and women, by playing back the cries, the discomfort cries and the distress cries. And we asked them to rate the level of discomfort and distress coded in those cries. And the results were absolutely amazing, because the people with no experience, absolutely no experience with the babies, they made tons of errors. So they were unable to rate correctly the rate of distress or discomfort that was coded in the baby cries. At the other extremity, the parents we were currently taking care of a young baby, they were extremely accurate in their judgment. They were extremely accurate in the way they rated the level of discomfort and distress. And we tested them with two different types of babies that they were familiar with and babies that they were not familiar with. And the humans who were in charge of a young baby, they were good with both types of babies. They were excellent with the babies they were familiar with, and they were still good with unfamiliar babies. And then you had we had a gradient going towards the people that were absolutely with no experience, and progressively we saw this loss in ability of decoding the level of distress that is coded in a human baby cries. So the level of experience is absolutely fantastic, and the level of knowledge you have of a given baby is also extremely important when you decode a baby cries.
So understanding the level of distress is one thing. What's the level of information that can be portrayed with the baby's cries in terms of, this cry means that they're hungry and this cry means that they're thirsty? Is there any evidence or the research that you've done that sort of suggests that the level of information that's carried over within the cry, or is it just more of a distressometer that's I'm mildly agitated, and then that kind of goes up to I'm incredibly frustrated and angry right now?
Is this your intuition that there is information besides, the level of distress in a cry? Do you think that there is information about the cause? You're a parent, right?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I mean, it's a good. Thank you for throwing that back on me. I mean, I do think that there is we know what our needs are as humans, and I'd also like to hear this from your research within the
Yeah.
animal kingdom
So,
as well.
so
Because
actually, yeah. So actually, a baby cry is a signal of alert. It's very. I mean, when you compare this vocalization to what we have in the animal world, we have in the animal world we have the begging calls of the chicks, for instance. We have the whines of the dog puppy, for instance. This kind of signal, they are very similar functionally and even acoustically to our human baby cries. And the function, the role of those signals is to elicit parental care. It's to attract somebody. Most often it's the parent, but it depends on the social organization the animal species has. But the function, the objective, I would say, of those vocalizations is to attract somebody that will take care of a baby that is not totally autonomous. Okay. And this is all the animal species, the birds and the mammals, where the parents take care of their young, they have this kind of vocalizations. So what are the big information that are coded in those signals? So you have two families, I would say, of information. The first information, we call it static information. It's the information about the identity of the sender. So in the human baby cries, but you have the same in the whines of a puppy or a fur seal or a baby fur seal. The static information is about the identity of the baby. So who I am. Okay. And each baby has its own way of crying. That's why it's so important to become a specialist of its baby, because then you will be able really to understand finally what the baby is saying. So static information. And then you have another family of information that is very commonly coded in the vocalizations of animals and humans. It's the dynamic information. And the dynamic information is more about your current state. So your discomfort or distress state, or it can be something more subtle about, your environment or whatever. And the question is, in this dynamic information family, in the human baby cries, which kind of dynamic information do we have? And I would say there is two possibilities. One possibility is that the baby cries code for the cause of the cry. So for instance, hunger cries versus I just want a hug, or versus, I don't know, my diaper is full, things like this. Or just a graded signal that would code for the level of discomfort and distress. Where, many people think that there is information about the cause in the baby cries, and so we wanted to test it. So what we did, we recorded many babies during weeks and weeks. We recorded all their cries, and we linked their cries with the action with how the parents managed to stop the cries. So did they had to feed the baby, or to change the diaper, or just to hug the baby, or things like this? And we found absolutely no correlation between the acoustics of the cry and the cause of the. But what we found that, and others found that too. We are not alone on that point, but is that in human baby cries, you have information about the level of discomfort and distress. And if you think about it in 1 minute, it makes total sense. Because when you have a graded signal, and that is the case of the baby cries, because the baby can modulate its cries, from very low discomfort to very, very high distress. You have the mean of you have the mean to elicit different degrees of parental care, because you will signal a different degree of urgency. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And this is this. I mean, if you take the eyes of the evolutionary biologists, for instance, it makes total sense because it's very simple. You have a very simple signal that you can use, that those tiny babies can use very easily. They just have to grade this signal from very low discomfort to very high distress, and then they will get the exact answer that they need. You see, and if, I mean, a system that would code for the cause of the cry would be far more complicated. First, for instance, the diaper. I mean, it's something very new in the evolutionary history of the human beings. You know, so and you imagine there should be in the baby cries some acoustic filters dedicated to each kind of cause that a cry can be. It could be extremely complicated, actually. So this graded system is far more simple and it's very efficient. So now, when I tell this kind of results that we got to parents, I have always parents saying, "No, I am able to. I am really able to know why my baby is crying." Yes, probably, but it's certainly because you have many other information around the cry. The cry is not alone. You know when the last time you fed your baby, for instance. You know the last time you changed the diaper. You know tons of other things around the cry that gives you tons of information that help you to interpreting the what the cry is saying. So you have to consider this system when you have the emitter, which is the baby, the receiver, which is the parent or the person who takes care of the baby. The baby has the possibility of emitting a graded signal, so signaling a level of discomfort and distress, embedded with its individual identity. And the receiver on the other side has to decode this graded signal, but it has not only the graded signal with the two types of information, the static and the dynamic, it has also all the context around the baby. And the receiver decodes the information using all of this context. And that's why the parents or the person who takes care of a given baby can become so efficient in decoding human baby cries. Does it make sense?
It does. And I feel like that information itself is probably going to be quite reassuring to many dads, especially the dads that are full-time working or even longer, or even to the gentleman that you said had only 2 hours of time with his baby each week. Because obviously in our culture, we always hear this, mothers know best, give the baby to mum, babies prefer mum, and all that sort of stuff. But it sounds like what your research is suggesting is that fathers recognize their own baby's cries just as accurately. And then
absolutely.
to decipher what that code is based on the level of discomfort is really just, you need to know the rest of the context of, okay, when was the last time they were changed? When was the last time they were fed?
Yeah. And I have really to insist on the importance of experience. I mean, you cannot become good at decoding a baby cry if you never pay attention to baby cry. You have to spend time with your baby, and it's not a question of sex or gender. It's really a question of how much time you will spend with the baby. And when you spend time with the baby, you learn how it is. You learn how to recognize the cries, but you not only the identity of the baby, you learn how to decode the level of discomfort and distress. Because depending on the baby, the acoustic filters that code for the level of discomfort can differ a little bit. And so that's why you have to become an expert of the baby. Of course, if you are an expert of your babies, you will also you will be quite good at decoding the cries of other babies that you have never heard. But you will never be as expert as you are for your own babies, the babies you are taking care. And regarding this difference between mothers and fathers, of course we are mammals, so no questions. The mothers are the mothers and the fathers are the fathers. But we have a very specific things that only few animal species have. We are a cooperative breeder. Cooperative breeder, it does mean that a baby is not raised by only one specific mother. It is raised by an assembly of people. And you don't have so many animal species that are like this. You can find several examples in the birds, but in mammals it's not so common. And in the primates, for instance, we are primates. In the primates, you have only a few species of primates that are cooperative breeders. You have some species of monkeys, for instance, where it's the father who takes the baby on its back. And the baby prefers to be on the father back, and he goes to the mother only to get some milk. And so the humans, we are a cooperative species. We know that. We spend our times cooperating. But we are a cooperative breeder. And so it does mean that the fathers, if they spend time with their babies, they can have exactly the same ability of the mothers to decode the cries. And we have demonstrated this, but other people have also demonstrated this kind of thing. And even when you measure the level of hormones, for instance, you can say that after the birth of the baby, the father's hormones change also. We are, in our species, the men can be involved a lot in their babies. And that's why we don't find so many differences. And in a very recent study that we published a few months ago, we did this experiment where we play back the cries of babies, but to adults. But those adults, they were, in this fMRI machine, this big machine that allows to see what happens in your brain. And so we were interested in seeing if there was differences between the brains of parents and the brain of non-parents, and the brains of men versus the brains of women when we were hearing to baby cries. And what we found that basically every human brain is sensitive to a human baby cries. So, you have tons of different areas in your brains that are activated when you're hearing a baby cries. The parental brain, so the brain of parents, is more specialized. So you have, more specialized areas that are really dedicated to baby cries. But we found no basic difference between men and women and between fathers and mothers. The only very significant differences between groups of people that we found difference between parents and non-parents, as I was saying, and we found an effect of the level of empathy of the people, because you can measure, the level of empathy. What is empathy? Is when you feel what the other people feel. For instance, if your neighbor, hurts itself, you have some people that will feel nothing, and you have people that will almost feel the same pain. Okay, so that measures the level of empathy that you are. And we found a correlation between the level of empathy and the level of activation of some specific areas in the brains. But it was independent of the sex. It was really, really linked to the empathy level. So you see, we are a cooperative breeder. We are a cooperative species, and so fathers can be really involved in their baby and with their baby, and they can learn as much as mothers how to decode the information that is coded in the cries.
I know there's many dads, in those first 3, 6. Sometimes even the first 2 years of having a baby feel quite disconnected. So if a new father out there is feeling a bit disconnected from his baby, what would your research say to him?
I think, I mean, I would say we are a cooperative species. In a cooperative species, it's not only the mother who takes care of the baby from the beginning. I mean, and it's if a father wants to be involved or to be connected, so to say, to the baby, he has to spend time with the baby. That's the first recipe, because you cannot be connected to a baby if you don't understand the baby, if you don't build the links, the social links that you need with your baby. And to build links and to understand the baby, the recipe is to spend time with the baby and to take care of the baby and to share with the mother, the tasks and things like this. And from the very beginning, not saying, okay, I will see when he or she will be 5, because then it will become more interesting. We will ride bicycle together or play football or whatever. No, from the very beginning, at the hospital where we are working, I mean, from the very beginning, I mean, the fathers, they are here when the mothers, when there is the birth, and they put the baby on the skin of the mothers and on the skin of the father. They make a lot of things like this, and they really try to involve a lot the fathers. It's not always sometimes it's difficult because the father has, a job or whatever, but they try to do this maximum. And I mean, in the new generation, what I can see is that the fathers, they are more and more involved with their babies. And I think that's good. And, once again, if just I take the biological perspective, I think that's really in line to what we are biologically, what we are, a cooperative species. So it's totally logical that we, the fathers, we involve a lot us in our babies.
Yeah, great. So I've got to ask, in your research across species, are there differences in the level of information that's being portrayed with other animal sounds? And does it vary from species to species? Like, for example, we've got a lot of our native birds here in New Zealand are very beautiful. They have different calls and they have different levels of intensity as well. Is the level of information being portrayed with animals sufficient to kind of convey some sort of language, or is it more an instinctual thing, like the baby's making a cry? So in terms of humans, we have a very complicated language and many different languages around the world, right? To portray ideas, to portray feelings, but also the environment around us, just ways of expressing the world. Do animals have that ability as well? Or are they just there purely living in the moment? I'm cold, I'm hungry, I'm horny, let's go.
I think there's two very important things to keep in mind. First, from what we know, the human language is the most complicated acoustic communication system that we know, and we have no equivalent in the animal world. But some animals can have complicated system, but not as much as ours. The second thing that we have to keep in mind, and that's very important, there is not the animal world on one side and the human world on the other side. Does mean that each animal species is in its own world. And, so for instance, if you go to birds, for instance, in the vocalizations of birds, in the songs or the calls, you have the two families of information, the dynamic and the static information. But depending on the bird species, you can express more or less subtle things. If you go to corvids, for instance, they are very social and they exchange tons of information, even about their environments. We don't understand everything, what they say, whatever. If you go to more solitary bird, probably it's far more simple. If you go to primates, for instance, I mean, for the moment, we are still unable to really decode the vocalizations of the chimp or of the bonobo, but what we are starting to see is that they can combine calls to make new meaning or things like this. So probably it's quite complicated. It's probably not equivalent to the human language, but it's not also a simple, reflexive thing. And the thing that people have to realize is that in the animal world, you have a huge diversity of communication systems. Even if you just stick to the acoustic, to the vocalizations, you have a huge diversity, and each animal species is in its one world. For instance, and if we go back to the parental care thing, I'm studying the crocodilians. I've been studying the crocodiles and the alligators and for years now, and we focused on the parent-offspring acoustic communication mostly. And in the crocodiles, for instance, we used to see the crocodilians as a very unique and undistinct world of species that are all the same. Actually, it's absolutely not true. And for instance, you have crocodilian species where only the mother takes care of the young. If you take the Nile crocodile, the one that is just on my back there, in the Nile crocodile, you have the fathers, they eat the young. But if you go to the Morlet crocodile, which is another species, in this species, both parents take care of the young. It does mean that they protect them from predators. They really take care of them. And if you go to another species, the gharial, this crocodilian species which has a very long nose and that lives in the Ganges River in India. In the gharial, the mothers, once they lay the eggs, but then they just ignore the young, and it's the fathers only who takes care to the young. And the fathers, it is very funny because the fathers, they gather together, they gather all their young in kind of a crèche, with many, many individuals, and you have all these fathers around protecting the young. So you see, even in the crocodilians, which seems to us as a very simplistic and undistinguished species of animals, you have this huge diversity from species where only the mothers take care of their young to species where it's only the father who takes care, etc. So we have to really realize that the animal world, it's the diversity, and we are only part of it. Okay.
Yeah, great. Well, that's good to know that other species are complicated like we are in terms of how they're raising their kids as well. Look, getting back to the human side and the communication piece. So there are many parenting books out there that talk about, understanding your cry and learning the cry. You've mentioned that anybody can do this and there's really not too much evidence in that. I mean, what do you say to people that are going out and doing courses around, Dunstan baby language or these kind of things?
Yeah, I think that, I've never been to the Dunstan baby language courses, so I don't know exactly what they say during this course, but I can imagine that you probably learn, tons of things about how you have to take care of your babies or whatever. But from what I know, I mean, you will never learn how to decode the cause. What is the cause of your baby's cries, just because in those cries the cause is not coded. So I mean, I think that's not possible. So don't also you can buy some equipment that say, okay, it will decode the cries of your baby. It will tell you when your baby is hungry or whatever. I mean, this is just not possible because the information is not here. And I think what the parents have to think about is that they are the best specialists of their baby. They are the best experts. It does not mean, the fact is that some babies, I would say even many babies, after a few weeks after birth, they start crying for any reason, for reason that we don't know. And parents or the people that would take care of the baby, you have no way of stopping the cries. And that's very, very common. And it lasts for a few weeks. Fortunately, most of the babies, I would say 99% of the baby, it stops only after a few weeks. But during those few weeks, you can become desperate because you can become, really, really mad about your baby cries. And I mean, there is not much to do except taking care of the baby. It's probably, if the baby is crying, it's probably because something is wrong, of course. And, it's the colic cries, as they are called. We don't know really the physiological cause of this cry. There is tons of different hypotheses. Probably the baby is in pain. Probably it's something, linked to the digestive system or whatever, but we don't know exactly. And the only thing that you have to do is just to take care of the baby, because the baby is probably feeling far better in your arms than just alone in its bed at that time. Even if it does not stop crying, it's probably better like that. There is only one thing that is very important. You can really become mad about the baby cries, and you don't, when you are in this situation, you don't have to feel culprit or whatever. It's just a normal thing, and but it can be very dangerous for the baby, because you have parents that are so so mad about the babies, they start shaking the baby or things like that. That's very, very dangerous for the baby, and it can happen to anybody, because anybody can become that absolutely overwhelmed by a baby cries. So so what do you have to do in this situation? The first thing, at the moment you feel that you are going to shake your baby or whatever, the first thing that you have to do, either you have the possibility to give the baby to another person, or if you don't have, and so you have to do it. If you don't have this possibility because you are alone or whatever, then put the baby in its bed without anything around, that it is not in danger or whatever. Go out of the room and take a breath. That's the best thing to do at the right moment where you feel that you are going to hurt your baby. And if, when you feel this, it does mean that you need help. And so, and it's not absolutely normal if, once again, if you take the perspective of the biologist, we are a cooperative species. So normally, in our biological organization, we are not alone with our baby. We are, several people can take care of the same baby at the same moment. And then in this kind of organization, we should avoid this moment where we want to get rid of the baby, we want to shake it. But in our social organization, in our modern life, I would say, it can happen very often that we are not in a situation where we can cooperate at the right moment. And so, the thing is that be aware that it can happen to anybody, because anybody, is able to bear with. That's totally possible. And then if you are in this situation, you really have to get help and to take a breath. It's not that you are not a good mother or a good father. It's just that you need more cooperative help. You need more cooperation. That's only the point.
Yeah, and it's an interesting point you raised there, because the old saying, it takes a village to raise a child.
I think when you think 1 minute about it, it makes total sense. We are one of the very few primate species which just a minute after birth, most of the time, a mother will not hesitate to give her baby to a person that she does not know, a nurse or a doctor or whatever. In most of the primate species, it's not possible. The mothers, they just keep their baby on them, except in the cooperative breeders. When you are a cooperative breeder, then you want to share the baby. You cooperate to raise it, and so that makes sense. For instance, the grandparents. You have not so many primate species where the grandparents help to raise the baby. We are one of these species. And in one study that we did a few years ago, we tested the effect of aging on our ability to decode the level of distress in baby cries. And what we found that this ability does not diminish with age. At the only condition is that the old person has to take care, has to not lose their expertise with the babies. But for instance, a grandparent, I of course, I'm talking about people that, have not neurodegenerative disease or whatever, obviously. But if you keep your cognitive ability, we tested people up to 70 years old or even 80. They were still able to perfectly decode if it was a discomfort, a distress cry, etc., except those who had no expertise with babies or who had lost this expertise. the people who were still grandparents taking care of young children, they were perfectly able, and they were even a little bit better than younger parents.
Right. Well, you'd hope so, because we're trying to learn from the wise elders. Hey, Nicolas, I'm conscious that you need to get off to another meeting.
Yes.
So I want to thank you very much for your time this evening, or to jumping on the podcast. Before you go, I just want to ask you, if there's one message you'd like the dads out there listening to take away from your research, what would that be?
It would be spend time with your baby and take care of your baby. And this is the recipe to make links with them and to understand them, and do it from the very beginning.
Wonderful. Thanks, Nicolas.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful day. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Bye.